And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
So just after Essen, I happen to have an Essen release, and today we're going to take a look at Pergamemnon by Iron Games, which is a kind of deck building game for 2 to 5 players. Plays about 45 minutes and suggests about ages 10 up. Now, I wouldn't really call it a deck building game. I would call it more of a war type of game using cards, and it's kind of a drafting game. You do add some cards to your deck, you do remove cards from your deck, and you do attack your opponents. So why don't we take a look at what's in this box, and then I'll give you my opinion on the game after we've looked at some of the mechanics. So here we have the contents of the box of Pergamemnon, and you can see it's all cards, several different decks of cards, several different types of cards. The first thing you have is a deck of charisma cards, which look like this. They're just yellow cards with a sun on them. They're white cards with a yellow sun on them, and they have the number 1 on them. These are going to be cards that you'll be using to buy creatures, and you're going to get for successfully defending your city as you do so during the game. You also have nation cards, which show what nation you are. You'll get dealt one of these randomly at the beginning of the game. It shows all of the different defenses and different types of weapons in the game. And then you're going to have a city card, which will be in the center of the table. You'll see here, there's a side with a red banner on it, and if you flip it over, there's a side with a gray banner on it. You'll be on the red banner side for most of the game, unless you happen to lose your leader during a fight, at which point you'll go to the gray banner side and lose all of your benefits that you get during the game. You're also going to get a deck of what are called creature cards, and they're going to look like this. They're going to have several icons on them, which are of importance. And let's start going through those. So, top, left, and right, you're going to see a weapon. It's a spear in this case, and this will be used for attacking your opponents. Underneath that is the strength of the weapon, 10. In the top is the cost to buy this card in charisma. You'll see it's 10 charisma, and that this card is worth 5 victory points at the end of the game. In addition, you'll see all of the defense values at the bottom. You'll see a helmet defense of 5, which is good for defending against swords, a breastplate defense of 7, which is good for defending against spears, and a shield defense of 6, good against bows. Finally, in the bottom, you'll see that this guy has flee. That means if your opponent tries to capture him, he simply runs away and goes back into the box. And there's a whole deck of these, and each game you're going to use 4 times the number of players of cards in your game. Finally, each player is going to get their own deck of cards. They're going to start with a deck of cards. For example, I showed you Egypt, so let's show the Egypt deck here. You have the Egypt deck of cards, and these are going to be laid out much the same way. You can see that this card here is a bowman, and he uses a bow as a weapon of strength 6. He is worth 1 victory point if you still have him in your deck at the end of the game, and his defense values are non-existent. He is also worth 1 charisma. So, that's the general layout of cards. I mentioned that each player has a leader. You can see here that this is the leader. It shows the banner in the top. And really, that's the only other benefit of leader, except for that they usually have pretty high charisma values and are good for buying cards. So here's a game of Pergamemnon set up for 3 players. You can see 1 player over here playing the Hellenes area, 1 the Egyptians here, and the Persians closest to me. Each player has their city with 1 charisma underneath, and they have their deck of cards. In the center of the table, you're going to see creatures that you can buy. The deck of creatures is here, and there's always 2 times the number of players' creatures available, and you can buy these on your turn if you have enough charisma. Additionally, you can see that there are cards for each of the cities in the center, and when a player's turn is over, they're going to flip their card over, and it will proceed to the next player's turn in order. On a player's turn, they're going to do one of 2 things. First thing, they're going to have a hand of 3 cards at all times, and they're going to look at these cards, and they're going to see if they can afford to buy any of the creatures in the center of the table. So, for example, with my cards here, I have a charisma of 4 on one card and no charisma on the others. I can use 1 card from my hand, and as many of the cards that I have tucked underneath my city for charisma as I want, in order to buy 1 card from the center of the table as long as I have enough charisma. So, for example, this guy here costs 5. I could discard my 4 charisma card, putting it in a discard pile, as well as this 1 charisma from underneath my city, and take the harpy, adding it to my deck. The rest of the cards in my hand would also get discarded, and I would draw back up, and it would be the next player's turn, and I would flip Egypt over. The other option on a turn is to attack a city. You can only attack cities that have not yet been activated. So, for example, in a 3-player game, if I was the Persians, I could attack Hellenes. And I would do so using my hand of cards. And when I do this, I'm going to choose 1 card from my hand. You can see here I have all swords, so I would say that I'm going to attack using swords. And I would choose Hellenes. And they're going to go in their hand, and they're going to choose a card to defend with. So, as I showed you previously, the cards have defense values on them. So you'll see here that the defense values of swords is going to be helmets. So this guy has a 9 defense in helmet. So each player would secretly choose one card from their hand. Let's say that the green player chose their leader. They chose Xerxes, so they'd play that face down. And the gray player also chose their leader. They chose Agamemnon, and they put him face down. And when they're done, they're both going to reveal their cards at the same time. And they're going to compare the attack value of the attacker to the defense value of the defender. So we have a 9 and a 9. Well, it's a tie. In this case, nobody wins. Everybody basically goes home. Nothing happens. Except for that the defender, for defending their city successfully, is going to get 1 charisma put underneath their city to use to buy something later. So let's say instead of defending with a 9, the gray player decided to defend with a 2 helmet in this case. Now we have a 9 on a 2. The attacker is clearly winning, but the defender gets to counterattack, or to try and defend more in order to potentially counterattack. And what they can do is then add a card from their hand to their defense. So now they can add their leader that they didn't play instead to their defense, having a defense of 11. What this would do is now allow them to counterattack. Since they're beating the attacker, they can counterattack with their attack of 7. And so that player is going to compare the attack of 7 to the defense of the leader that attacked them. In this case, his defense is 6 against swords. So now this leader is losing. But he can add a card from his hand to his defense. So for example, he could add this card here, adding it to his defense, and now you have a defense of 9, more than 7. But now this guy is attacking with an 8 spears. So we go back to the defense here, and we look at what Agamemnon's defense is for spears. It's a 5. So now he could add a card, and he only has 1 card left, so he's going to add his 3. Well, that happens to be an 8. And now you have a tie. But in this case, since he tied with 2 cards, he still attacks back. You have the counterattack. And basically, this is going to keep going until one player can't successfully defend. Once that happens, the winner of the fight is going to take all of the loser's cards and add them either to their discard pile or underneath their city as charisma. In addition, if the defender wins, they're going to get 1 charisma card to place underneath their city. If the attacker wins the fight, the defender's card is going to get flipped to its inactive side, meaning they won't get a turn. If the defender wins the fight, the attacker's card gets flipped. However, when the attacker wins, he's going to get an additional turn. If both sides draw, both cards get flipped and no one gets an additional turn. The game is going to go until all of the cards from the creature deck have been bought and added to players' decks. At that point, whichever player has the most points in their deck is going to be declared the winner. So Pergamemnon is one of those games that I really gotta say I didn't enjoy. It's kind of war-like. You're just playing cards and trying to beat the other player's cards, and what you have in your hand is going to basically decide how the game goes. Now, yes, you can decide whether or not to play specific cards in specific orders, but for the most part, if you have a bad hand, you have a bad hand, and you're going to lose the fight. It's going to play better with more players than less players. With 2 players, in my opinion, it's completely unplayable. Just terrible. But with more players, it gives you more strategic options in who you're going to attack. It gives you the chance of trying to attack and win and take another turn. It's just all around a better game with more people. But for the most part, not a game that I was enthralled with at all. Not something that's going to maintain its spot in my collection, and not something that I would heartily suggest anybody go out and pick up if they're looking for a great game to fill a nice filler spot.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.